Hello everyone, we're kicking things off tonight with something more subtle. The murky, lamplit realm of Victorian-era London, a metropolis driven by towering dreams, mechanical wonders and devastating destitution. This wasn't the London featured in tales of brilliant detectives or royal festivities in manicured gardens. This was the London shrouded in haze, coated in grime and reeking of decay, a location where making it through another day felt like a minor triumph. Before settling in, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing, if you truly appreciate the content here. Drop a comment letting me know your location and current time. It's always intriguing to discover who's watching from various corners of the globe. Now lower the lighting, perhaps switch on a fan for that gentle ambient sound, and let's settle into this evening's exploration together. Your eyes flutter open, and immediately you're greeted by your sibling's foot, mere inches away, filthy and jerking slightly from whatever nightmarish vision haunts their sleep. Welcome to your singular living space. It's not designated as a bedroom or a lounge. It's simply the room, your entire universe. You occupy it alongside 6 other individuals. One mattress, 2 chairs that seem structurally questionable, and a rodent who's become such a fixture, you're contemplating demanding rent payments. The walls lack any decorative covering, just bare sections where something once existed. When precipitation falls, the ceiling drips, and even during dry spells, mysterious liquid seeps through that you've deliberately chosen not to examine. The hearth is merely ornamental. Moisture permeates the atmosphere. The wooden planks groan beneath you as though prophesying your eventual demise. A threadbare woolen covering shields you, unwashed since conflicts in Crimea ended. Your head rests against straw stuffing. Potentially blended with somebody's abandoned hosiery, no water system exists. That container positioned in the corner serves multiple purposes: sanitation, washing, and urgent hydration source, depending on the hour and level of desperation. You've mastered mouth breathing during morning hours. It provides slight relief. A single aperture exists. Though calling it a window feels generous, coated so thoroughly with residue and vapor that it primarily transmits sounds, rolling carts, merchants hawking wares, and somebody's persistent hacking cough from nearby dwellings. You attempt to ignore that this opening overlooks a passage where the meat vendor discards remnants, and your adjacent neighbor houses his livestock. Each dawn initiates a family-wide choreography. Garments are donned beneath coverings to combat frigid temperatures. Everyone rotates around the washing vessel like participants in a game offering minimal rewards. Inevitably, someone topples the waste container. Nevertheless, this cramped space remains your sanctuary. You've memorized which plank creaks underfoot, which section continuously leaks, and which glass pane vibrates just before your neighbor erupts about his missing footwear. The odor, the particles, the peculiar sensation of acceptance, all familiar. But understand clearly, this dwelling provides no comfort, it possesses no charm. It's a space conditioning you for external hardships by inflicting preliminary suffering before departure. And believe me, the outdoor environment offers no greater mercy. You emerge through the entrance, vision still clouded from slumber while clutching a fragment of hardened bread, and instantly collide with an impenetrable curtain of suffocating vapor. This isn't the dreamy, candlelit atmosphere depicted in literature. No. This represents London's notorious pea-souper fog. Breathing through it resembles inhaling through damp fabric. Overhead grayness, ground-level grayness, atmospheric grayness. Your extended limb disappears from view. That shape ahead could be illumination infrastructure or equine transportation, genuinely uncertain. This meteorological phenomenon transcends mere weather. It's lethal. Created through the unfortunate combination of industrial coal emissions and natural condensation, it adheres to all surfaces. It infiltrates respiratory systems, lines throats, and gives clothing that distinctive London appearance. Streak-marked with soot and moderately combustible. Persistent coughing dominates. Yours. Everyone's. It forms part of the urban symphony. Alongside ringing bells and clattering hoofbeats, young ones wheeze like veteran tobacco users. Elderly men produce such violent expulsions, they create vibrations in nearby structures. Medical professionals recommend rural relocation. Excellent counsel for those possessing property and properly functioning lungs. The aromatic profile proves complex. Chimney residue, waste vapors, equine excrement, and previous evening's overcooked vegetables. Were fragrance manufacturers to bottle this essence, they'd label it Ode to Urban Suffering. This penetrates everything imaginable. Hair follicles, food items, your solitary presentable garment reserved for mourning ceremonies and employment opportunities. Everything bears progress's distinctive scent. Most troubling, nobody registers surprise. Citizens navigate blindly, literally so. Street lamps burn continuously yet provide minimal assistance, adjacent to your position. Someone stumbles audibly while another curses as their umbrella vanishes into the mist like a phantom vessel. Nocturnal hours intensify thickness. Vapor curls through doorway gaps, enveloping residential buildings. Without maintaining illumination, one might walk directly into heating structures or worse, a neighbor's personal space indeed. Victorian London's atmosphere doesn't merely restrict breathing, it marks you permanently, infuses you with smoke, and challenges your continued respiration. And you haven't yet reached the marketplace. Having escaped bedding, your smoke-saturated quarters, and descended into gray morning beginnings. Your stomach protests audibly. Breakfast time approaches. Except breakfast in Victorian London constitutes less of a proper meal, and more a ceremony and diminished expectations. As working class, which you almost certainly represent, breakfast isn't eggs, toast, or generous bacon portions. It's bread so hardened it could serve architectural purposes. Perhaps grain porridge if rodents haven't consumed cupboard oats. And tea, invariably tea not for comfort but because boiling likely prevents mortality. Milk only with financial means, and even then it's hazardous, potentially diluted or worse, preserved using formaldehyde by entrepreneurial sellers considering child safety, a flexible concept. Sugar costs excessively, butter exists as folklore, preserves appear only through inheritance. With fortune, factory employment, or bakery proximity, you might detect warm bread aromas, don't anticipate participation. That fragrance belongs to others, probably someone with headwear and engraved door nameplates. True misfortune, orphaned, widowed without income, or mechanically displaced, means queuing at charitable institutions for gray substance ladles. It's heated. It's technically edible. That's the kindest assessment available. Street merchants might offer fried tubers or aged meat pastries, but caution advised. Meat composition remains mysterious, oil ancient, intestinal consequences probable still. The aroma proves oddly appealing. When starving, everything resembles optimism. Consumption happens rapidly, standing wrapped in outerwear like protective denial. No dining facilities exist, no gentle morning melodies, just frigid vapor, metallic clanging, and distant sounds of someone already protesting stolen fuel. Now, with stomachs merely partially satisfied and spirits entirely unsatisfied, it's time to confront the genuine monster, London's streets. Welcome to Victorian London's thoroughfares, a sprawling, chaotic organism pulsating with smoke, mud, and human suffering. Each step forward constitutes calculated risk. The street demonstrates no concern for work punctuality or safe passage attempts without fatal trampling. Immediately, proper walkways don't exist. Or if present, they're so constricted, fractured, and congested that utilizing them becomes polite suggestion rather than safety guarantee. Primary roadways represent muddy battlegrounds of hoof strikes, wagon wheels, and ankle-deep sludge. Horse-drawn vehicles hurtle past at frightening velocities. Carriages cut corners sharply. One miscalculation means face-planting into puddles emitting death-adjacent odors. Because something genuinely perished there. Mind the drainage channels running street center, conveying the city's discarded splendor. Decomposing produce. Deceased rodents, coal dust, chamber pot contents launched from elevated windows. And occasional footwear. Foot inclusion optional. Navigate with caution. The Thames proximity guarantees intensified stench. London's primary waterway functions as the metropolis's communal waste receptacle. Industrial discharge, human waste, deceased livestock, and factory byproducts all terminate there. During summer months, the odor achieves legendary status. Parliament members once abandoned sessions because the reek penetrated governmental chambers. They termed it the Great Stink. Citizens called it Thursday. Navigating crowds proves equally perilous. Pickpockets demonstrate legendary skill. Beggars position themselves strategically. Street children weave between pedestrians like liquid mercury. Merchants promote questionable commodities, miracle tonics. Salvaged garments, yesterday's fish, you've learned distrust instinctively. That friendly gentleman offering directions? Probably an accomplice, that dropped coin glittering appealingly. Likely bait, nothing remains free here. Not even breathable atmosphere. Then horses exist everywhere. Magnificent, strong, and perpetually defecating, streets transform into biological minefields. You've mastered the sideways shuffle, the strategic leap, the prayer-accompanied stride hoping your sole footwear survives another encounter. And when horses collapse from exhaustion, malnutrition, or simple surrender, they're abandoned roadside until removal teams arrive. Sometimes days elapse, life continues around equine corpses, people conduct commerce, children play nearby, and someone inevitably uses the carcass as impromptu seating. Because Victorian London operates on a straightforward principle: keep moving or get trampled. Survival supersedes sentiment. Now you've reached your employment destination, perhaps a factory, perhaps a workshop, perhaps someone's residence where you'll scrub, cook, or serve invisibly, whatever the location. One certainty exists: it will extract everything from you and compensate minimally in return. Factory labor means entering mechanical chaos, massive looms, grinding gears, steam-powered apparatus operating at dangerous velocities, safety regulations, non-existent protective equipment. What's that? You work proximate to machinery capable of severing limbs, and your primary defense is alertness and fortune. The noise proves deafening, a relentless mechanical roar saturating your skull until you can't recall silence. The atmosphere chokes with textile particles, metal shavings, or coal residue depending on your industry. By day's end, your lungs feel coated because they are. Child laborers occupy the most hazardous positions. Small hands prove ideal for reaching into operational machinery, crawling beneath looms, or squeezing into confined ventilation passages. Accidents occur frequently. Missing fingers, crushed hands, worse. No compensation exists, no medical attention, just replacement with another desperate child. For domestic servants, labor proves different yet equally exhausting. You rise before dawn, retire after midnight. Your responsibilities encompass everything: cooking, cleaning, laundry, childcare, sometimes even your employer's most intimate requirements. You exist to serve, remaining invisible until needed. Meals consist of leftovers, if permitted to eat your quarters, usually basement or attic spaces, freezing or sweltering depending on season. Privacy represents luxury, dignity, a distant memory. Dock workers endure brutal physical demands, loading vessels, unloading cargo, hauling weight that slowly destroys spines and spirits. Compensation occurs daily if you're selected from the morning crowd. No selection? No earnings, no food, no rent payment, so you return tomorrow, hoping desperately for opportunity while competing against hundreds equally desperate. Street sellers, flower vendors, match girls, newspaper hawkers brave all weather conditions for minuscule profits. You purchase inventory, hoping to sell before day's end. Failure means loss. Success means survival until tomorrow's repeat, regardless of occupation. The principle remains constant: labor extensive hours for insufficient compensation under conditions that would horrify modern observers. But complaint isn't optional. Thousands queue behind you, willing to accept worse conditions for less payment. You're replaceable, expendable, a cog in industrial machinery that values mechanical efficiency over human welfare. Yet you return daily, because the alternative, starvation, homelessness, the workhouse, proves infinitely worse. So you endure, you adapt, you survive. One brutal day at a time. Then disease arrives in Victorian London. Illness isn't occasional visitor but permanent resident. It lurks in contaminated water, putrid air, overcrowded dwellings, and streets flowing with waste. It strikes randomly, mercilessly, and frequently. Cholera represents the ultimate terror. This waterborne disease spreads through contaminated supplies, which describes most of London's water. Victims experience violent symptoms: severe purging, dehydration, blue-tinged skin, death within hours. Entire families perish overnight, streets empty. Panic spreads faster than the disease itself. No one understands transmission. Physicians blame miasma, bad air theory. So people burn herbs, wear aromatic sachets, avoid night air. None of this helps, because the actual culprit, bacteria in water, remains unknown until John Snow's groundbreaking 1854 investigation linking a Broad Street pump to an outbreak. Even then, acceptance comes slowly. Tuberculosis, termed consumption, claims victims gradually. It hollows lungs, triggers bloody coughing, wastes bodies slowly. It's romanticized in literature. The tragic, pale, poetic demise. Reality proves less aesthetic. It's painful, prolonged, and highly contagious. Entire households contract it. There's no cure, no treatment. Just inevitable decline. Typhoid fever, scarlet fever, diphtheria, smallpox. The list extends endlessly. Children prove especially vulnerable. Infant mortality rates shock modern sensibilities. Families expect losing children. It's not pessimism but realism. You bear numerous offspring, hoping some survive to adulthood. Then there's the less dramatic, but equally destructive afflictions. Rickets from malnutrition, respiratory diseases from toxic air, infections from untreated wounds, parasites from unsanitary conditions. Your body becomes a battlefield, constantly fighting invasions on multiple fronts. Medical care? Only for those affording it. Hospitals exist, but primarily for the destitute, often doubling as death houses. Treatments range from ineffective to actively harmful. Bloodletting, mercury administration, opium prescription for everything. Anesthesia exists but remains rare. Surgery without it remains horrifyingly common. Many avoid medical professionals entirely, trusting folk remedies, prayer, or simple resignation. You learn recognizing death's approach, the particular pallor, the labored breathing, the vacant stare. You learn sitting with dying, offering what comfort possible, which usually means just presence. And then you learn continuing afterward, because in Victorian London, death represents such constant companion that excessive mourning becomes unaffordable luxury. You grieve certainly, but quickly because survival demands your attention. The living require feeding, the rent needs paying, and disease, patient and persistent, already seeks its next victim. But let's discuss what happens when disease finally claims you. Death in Victorian London isn't a dignified fade. It's a public spectacle, a commercial transaction, and for many a descent into indignity that continues beyond the grave. When someone dies at home, which most people do because hospitals are where you go to die publicly, the body doesn't get whisked away by professionals. It stays, sometimes for days, in the same room where the family eats, sleeps, and tries to continue living. There's no refrigeration, no embalming for the common folk, just a body, slowly decomposing, while the family scrambles to afford a funeral. If you're lucky, neighbors contribute. If you're not, well, there's always the pauper's grave. Funerals are expensive, the coffin, the hearse, the mourning clothes. All of it costs money most families don't have. So they scrimp, they borrow, they buy the cheapest box available, which might be flimsy enough that the bottom falls out during transport. It's happened. Mourning culture, however, is elaborate. Queen Victoria set the standard after Prince Albert's death, and suddenly everyone's expected to perform grief with precision. Black clothing, mourning jewelry made from the deceased's hair, strict social rules about how long you mourn and how publicly you display it. But here's the grim reality. All this Victorian mourning theater exists because death is so common that without ritual, it might become too easy to forget, too easy to become numb. The poor can't afford elaborate mourning. They bury their dead quickly, cheaply, and move on. Because they have to, cemeteries overflow. London's churchyards, once adequate, now burst with bodies stacked in shallow graves. The smell is indescribable. Coffins surface during heavy rain. Body snatchers, resurrection men, dig up fresh corpses to sell to medical schools for dissection practice. Families sometimes guard graves for weeks. The solution? New cemeteries outside city limits. The Magnificent Seven, grand Victorian burial grounds designed like parks. But even these fill quickly, and if you're truly destitute, your final destination is the mass grave. No marker, no ceremony, just a pit where bodies are layered with lime, dozens at a time, anonymous in death as they often were in life. Children's deaths are so common they're barely remarked upon. A family might lose half their offspring before age 5. You name a child after a deceased sibling. You reuse the mourning clothes. You learn to grieve quietly, privately, because openly dwelling on loss would mean never stopping. And yet there's a strange intimacy with death. People photograph their dead loved ones, propped up as if alive, post-mortem photography. It's often the only image families can afford. The deceased, posed carefully, surrounded by family, capturing one final moment together. It seems macabre now. Then it was love. So death in Victorian London isn't hidden away or sanitized. It's present, visible, and democratically distributed. Rich or poor, clean or filthy, pious or profane, death comes for everyone. The only difference is how much dignity you can afford when it arrives. Now, if all of this, the disease, the death, the grinding poverty, sounds unbearable, well, Victorians thought so too, which is why they developed an impressive array of coping mechanisms, some healthy, most decidedly not. Enter Victorian vices. First, there's gin. Oh, the gin, cheap, potent, and available on every corner. Gin shops proliferate in poor neighborhoods, offering temporary oblivion at affordable prices. The phrase drunk for a penny, dead drunk for tuppence isn't exaggeration. It's advertising. Women, men, Children. Everyone drinks. Because when your reality involves 14-hour workdays in lethal conditions, followed by returning to a room shared with 6 people and a rat, sobriety loses its appeal. Gin dulls pain, hunger, and hopelessness. It also destroys families, fuels violence, and kills slowly. But slowly beats quickly when quickly is your current trajectory anyway. Then there's opium, perfectly legal, widely available, sold as laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol. It's marketed as medicine for everything teething babies. Laudanum, menstrual cramps? Laudanum, cough. Depression? General malaise? Laudanum. Addiction is rampant but not yet understood as such. People don't realize they're dependent until they try stopping and discover they physically can't. By then, it's too late. The combination of widespread opium use and gin consumption creates a population that's perpetually intoxicated, which is arguably the only way Victorian working-class life becomes tolerable. For those seeking more communal vices, there are music halls, raucous, rowdy establishments featuring performances ranging from singers to comedians to acts that would never pass Victorian censorship standards in more respectable venues. Entry costs pennies, the entertainment is crude, the crowd's drunker, and for a few hours, you can forget that tomorrow means returning to the factory. Prostitution thrives. It's called the great social evil, but that doesn't stop it from being ubiquitous. Thousands of women turn to sex work out of desperation. Widows, orphans, seamstresses whose wages can't cover rent. It's dangerous, degrading, and often the only option available. The Victorians, publicly prudish and privately hypocritical, condemn these women while simultaneously creating the economic conditions that force them into the trade. Crime, of course, represents another coping mechanism. If society offers no legitimate path to survival, illegitimate paths proliferate. Pickpocketing, burglary, scams. Victorian London is a masterclass in creative criminality. Street gangs operate openly. Organized crime networks control entire neighborhoods. The police, newly formed and undermanned, can barely maintain order. And for entertainment that doesn't involve intoxication or illegality, there's the spectacle. Public executions draw enormous crowds. Thousands gather to watch hangings at Newgate Prison, treating it like a festival. Street performers, freak shows, penny dreadfuls, sensationalist pamphlets filled with lurid tales of murder and mystery. The Victorians are simultaneously repressed and obsessed with the gruesome, the scandalous, the forbidden, in essence. Victorian coping strategies reveal a society aware of its own brutality but unwilling or unable to change. So people numb themselves, distract themselves, or exploit each other. Because when the system crushes you, sometimes crushing something else, even yourself, feels like the only form of control available. But let's pause for a moment of dark comedy. Because Victorian London, for all its misery, produces some truly absurd situations. Consider the job market. Yes, factories and domestic service exist. But Victorian entrepreneurial spirit creates occupations so bizarre, they seem fictional. There are pure finders, people who collect dog excrement to sell to tanneries for leather processing. The pay is terrible. The work is exactly what you imagine. But it's employment. Then there are toshers, sewer scavengers who wade through London's underground waste system searching for valuables that wash down drains. Coins, jewelry, anything sellable. They work in darkness, surrounded by rats, toxic fumes, and occasionally alligators. Yes, alligators. Exotic pets flushed into sewers that survived and grew. Victorian London sewers were terrifying. Crossing sweepers are usually children who clear animal dung from street crossings, so wealthy pedestrians can pass without soiling expensive shoes. They work for tips. Most earn barely enough to survive. But they perfect the art of looking pathetic enough to inspire charity, while remaining invisible enough not to offend. There are resurrection men, previously mentioned. But worth emphasizing, these are professional grave robbers supplying medical schools with cadavers. It's illegal but lucrative. Some don't wait for natural death. Turning to murder, the infamous Burke and Hare case proves how thin the line between entrepreneurship and homicide can become. Rat catchers hunt rodents for bounty but also for sport. Rat baiting pits where dogs kill rats for entertainment. The record? A dog killed 100 rats in under 6 minutes. Spectators gamble on outcomes because, apparently, Victorian Londoners needed more reasons to feel depressed. And then there's fashion. Oh, the fashion. Women wear corsets so tight they cause organ displacement, fainting, and occasional rib fractures. But tiny waists signify status, so discomfort is irrelevant. Crinolines, enormous hooped skirts, spread so wide that women can't fit through doorways or sit on normal chairs. These regularly catch fire from candles and hearths, incinerating wearers. Dozens die annually. Fashion literally kills. Men fare slightly better, though their top hats, while elegant, serve as convenient targets for street urchins who knock them off for sport. Also, the hats are made using mercury in the felting process, which causes mercury poisoning, hence mad as a hatter, stylish and neurotoxic. The Victorians also develop an obsession with death-themed jewelry, mourning brooches containing dead relatives' hair, rings inscribed with death dates. It's simultaneously touching and deeply creepy. They wear human remains as accessories. And let's not ignore Victorian medicine's more experimental moments. Treatments include prescribing heroin for coughs, effective but problematic, cocaine for depression, Sigmund Freud was a fan, and arsenic for complexion improvement, poisonous but gives a nice pallor. One doctor promotes genital mutilation as a cure for masturbation, which he believes causes everything from epilepsy to insanity. Many follow his advice. Victorian London, in summary, represents humanity's capacity to create elaborate, often absurd systems of suffering, then simply accept them as normal. Because once everyone's equally miserable, misery becomes invisible. It's just life. But beneath all the grime, death, and dysfunction, Victorian London is still a place where people live, not just survive, live. They fall in love in gin-soaked music halls. They raise children against impossible odds. They create art, tell stories, find moments of joy in circumstances that should extinguish joy entirely. Because humans are resilient, adaptable, and occasionally irrational in their optimism, families celebrate small victories: a child surviving past 5, a week without illness, an extra shilling in wages. These aren't just occasions for relief, they're triumphs. People forge friendships across tenement walls, sharing food when they barely have enough, watching neighbors' children, grieving together, laughing together. Community forms not despite hardship but because of it. Romantic relationships develop in the strangest circumstances. Courtship happens in factory shadows, on street corners during brief Sunday freedoms. Love letters are written on scraps of paper by barely literate hands. Weddings occur in plain clothes because fancy ones aren't affordable. But they happen. People commit to each other, fully aware that life will be hard, that children will likely die, that poverty will never end. They choose partnership anyway. Religious faith for many provides structure and hope. Churches offer not just spiritual comfort but practical assistance. Charity, education, community. The Salvation Army, founded in 1865, provides meals and shelter to the destitute. For those with no other safety net, faith organizations are sometimes the only thing standing between survival and complete destitution. Education, though limited, exists. Sunday schools teach reading to working-class children. Ragged schools offer free education to the poorest. It's not comprehensive, it's not equal, but it's something. And for children who learn to read, entire worlds open. Penny dreadfuls, newspapers, eventually books. Knowledge becomes an escape route, narrow but real. Art flourishes in unexpected places. Street musicians perform. Ballad sellers hawk printed songs. Storytellers entertain crowds. Cultural production isn't limited to the wealthy. It emerges from poverty, reflecting its struggles in small rebellions. Charles Dickens himself rises from working-class origins. His novels depicting Victorian London's brutalities while insisting on humanity's capacity for kindness. Even small pleasures matter. A rare sunny day, a street vendor's joke, a child's laugh despite everything. These moments don't negate suffering, but they coexist with it, because life, even at its worst, contains multiplicities. It's not just one thing. And slowly, very slowly, change begins. Reformers document conditions. Journalists expose scandals. Philanthropists, motivated by various combinations of genuine compassion and religious duty, fund improvements. Laws gradually pass, though enforcement lags, limiting child labor, improving sanitation, regulating tenements. It's inadequate. It's too slow. Many die before things improve. But the arc, however painfully, bends toward something less brutal. Victorian London ultimately represents a moment of transition, from agrarian society to industrial powerhouse, from medieval squalor to modern infrastructure. The people living through it pay the cost. They are the experiment, the sacrifice, the foundation upon which future improvements are built. Their suffering isn't romanticized or justified. It's simply acknowledged. They endured so others wouldn't have to. And in that endurance, there's a kind of grim nobility, not because suffering is noble, but because continuing despite it requires strength most of us will never need to summon. So when we look back at Victorian London, its fog, filth, and countless injustices, we're not just observing history, we're witnessing what humans can survive, what they'll endure, and how even in systems designed to crush them, they find ways to remain human, flawed, struggling, occasionally broken, but human nonetheless. Now let's shift from Victorian London's grim streets to something that shaped not just that era, but all of human civilization: the calendar. That grid of numbers we glance at daily, planning meetings, celebrating birthdays, counting down to weekends, carries within it thousands of years of human ingenuity, religious devotion, political maneuvering, and astronomical observation. The story of how we learned to measure time is the story of humanity itself. Long before Victorian Londoners checked pocket watches or factory whistles dictated shifts, ancient humans looked skyward, seeking patterns in chaos. The sun rose and set. That was a day. The moon waxed and waned. That was roughly a month. Seasons cycled. That was a year. But organizing these observations into predictable systems took millennia. Early humans marked time through necessity. Hunter-gatherers tracked animal migrations and plant cycles. When do the salmon return? When do berries ripen? When does winter arrive? Survival depended on remembering, so they carved notches into bones, stacked stones to mark solstices, and passed down oral calendars through generations. These weren't abstract mathematical exercises. They were life or death calculations. The first formal calendars emerged with agriculture. Farming demands precise timing. Plant too early, frost kills crops. Plant too late, harvests fail suddenly. Sometime in spring wasn't sufficient. Farmers needed specific dates. Thus, civilizations developed increasingly sophisticated timekeeping systems. In ancient Egypt, priests observed the Nile's annual flooding, correlating it with Sirius's appearance, the heliacal rising. This astronomical event predicted inundation with remarkable accuracy, allowing Egyptians to create a 365-day solar calendar around 3000 BCE. It wasn't perfect. It drifted slowly against actual solar years, but it was close enough for administrative purposes and far superior to previous methods. Meanwhile, Mesopotamian civilizations developed lunar calendars based on moon phases. A month equaled one lunar cycle, approximately 29.5 days. 12 lunar months totaled only 354 days, shorter than the solar year by 11 days. The solution: periodically insert extra months to realign lunar cycles with seasons. Complicated but functional, these early calendars served dual purposes: practical and sacred. They determined when to plant, when to harvest, when rivers would flood, but also when to worship, when to fast when gods required propitiation. The calendar was simultaneously agricultural almanac and religious text. Religious observance particularly drove calendrical development. Judaism's lunar solar calendar balanced moon phases with seasonal agricultural festivals. The Hebrew month began with new moon sightings, announced by witnesses who reported to religious authorities. This system required constant astronomical vigilance and rabbinic calculation to maintain accuracy. In ancient Rome, the original calendar was a chaotic mess, 10 months totaling 304 days, with winter being an undefined period. King Numa Pompilius supposedly added January and February, creating a 12-month calendar, but political manipulation regularly disrupted it. Priests added or removed days arbitrarily, extending terms of allied officials or shortening opponents. The calendar became a political weapon. Julius Caesar, recognizing this dysfunction, instituted radical reform in 46 BCE. Consulting with Egyptian astronomer Sosigenes, he created the Julian calendar, a solar calendar with 365 days, adding one extra day every fourth year, leap year, to account for the actual solar year's 365-25-day length. To realign the calendar initially, 46 BCE lasted 445 days, history's longest year. The Julian calendar spread across the Roman Empire and eventually throughout Christian Europe, remaining standard for over 1,600 years despite its minor inaccuracy. But what about weeks? Unlike days, months, and years, all based on observable astronomical phenomena, weeks are purely arbitrary human constructs. The 7-day week likely originated in ancient Mesopotamia, possibly connected to observations of 7 celestial bodies visible to the naked eye. Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn. Each day was dedicated to one deity associated with these bodies. a practice surviving in day names across languages. Sunday, Monday, Moon Day, Saturday, Saturn Day, while other days honor Norse gods in English or Roman gods in Romance languages. The 7-day week gained religious significance in Judaism, with the Sabbath commandment consecrating the seventh day as rest. This pattern, 6 days of labor, 1 of rest, reflected the Genesis creation narrative. God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. This sacred structure was adopted and carried through Christianity and Islam, eventually spreading across the Western world. By the time Romans adopted it in the 1st century CE, the 7-day week had become a fixture, not because it was logical, but because it was meaningful. Unlike months and years, the week has no natural basis. It's a human invention, a rhythm imposed on time, yet it endures, shaping work schedules, religious observance, and social life across centuries and civilizations. By breaking time into months and weeks, humanity gave time rhythm, and rhythm in turn gave us ritual, rest and routine. As civilizations matured, calendars evolved from survival tools into power instruments. Whoever controlled the calendar controlled not just seasons, but society itself. Taxes, festivals, harvests, royal decrees, even war campaigns were governed by dates. Calendars became political tools, religious statements, and cultural weapons used to shape identity, unify empires, and reinforce authority. In ancient Rome, Julius Caesar's reform of the chaotic Roman calendar wasn't just a bureaucratic fix. It was a statement. The new Julian calendar, introduced in 45 BCE, imposed order over disorder. It allowed the Roman Empire to synchronize administration across vast territories from Britain to Egypt. And with July renamed in Caesar's honor, the calendar itself became a monument to his legacy. Later, Augustus Caesar followed suit, naming August after himself and adjusting its length to equal July, because no emperor wanted his month shorter than his predecessors. In Rome, even time had to flatter power. Meanwhile, in China, imperial dynasties created calendars tailored to reigning emperors' mandates. The Chinese calendar, a sophisticated lunisolar system, wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. When a new emperor rose, a new calendar cycle often began, reinforcing the idea that he had inherited heaven's mandate. The calendar reflected cosmic harmony and the emperor's place within it. The Islamic calendar, established during Caliph Umar's reign in the 7th century CE, began with a political and spiritual event, the Hijra, Prophet Muhammad's migration from Mecca to Medina. Unlike solar calendars, it remained purely lunar, making religious festivals float through seasons. That fluidity, however, became a unifying thread, tying Muslims across different regions and climates to the same spiritual timeline. Even in medieval Europe, calendars became battlegrounds for authority. The church aligned saints' days and religious festivals with pre-existing pagan cycles to ease conversion. Time itself was baptized. The calendar didn't just tell people what day it was, it told them how to behave. Calendars weren't neutral. They were curated by those in charge, defining when debts were due, when armies marched, when gods were honored, and when history began. From emperors to priests, kings to astronomers, the right to mark time became a form of dominion, because to shape the calendar was to shape reality itself, to make your story the rhythm of everyone else's life. By the 16th century, time itself had drifted out of sync. The Julian calendar, once a masterpiece of Roman engineering, had slowly lost accuracy. It miscalculated the solar year by about 11 minutes annually, a small error that over centuries accumulated. By the 1500s, the spring equinox, which once fell around March 21st, had crept backward to March 10th. For a church that depended on precise dates to celebrate Easter, this was a theological crisis. Enter Pope Gregory XIII, who in 1582 launched history's most significant calendar reform, the Gregorian calendar. Guided by Jesuit astronomers and mathematicians, the Pope's solution was both simple and radical. To realign the calendar with the actual solar year, 10 days were dropped. October 4th, 1582 was immediately followed by October 15th. Time itself was rewritten, but the reform didn't stop there. Gregory's team also revised the leap year rule. The Julian calendar added a leap day every 4 years, but that was too generous. The new rule kept the leap year every 4 years unless the year was divisible by 100. Unless again it was divisible by 400. So 1600 was a leap year, but 1700, 1800, and 1900 were not. This corrected the long-term drift and brought the calendar's accuracy within 26 seconds per year of the solar cycle. Still, adoption wasn't immediate or universal. Protestant and Orthodox nations viewed the Gregorian calendar with suspicion, seeing it as Catholic power play. England didn't adopt it until 1752, by which point the error had grown to 11 days. Russia didn't switch until after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1918. The result? For centuries, dates could differ drastically between countries. Imagine two people celebrating New Year's 2 weeks apart in neighboring lands. Despite resistance, the Gregorian calendar eventually became the global standard, not because of religion, but because of practicality. As science, navigation, commerce, and international diplomacy grew, the world needed a shared system of time. The Gregorian calendar was simply too precise, too useful to ignore. This wasn't just a correction, it was a revolution in how humanity experienced time. With the stroke of a papal pen, the world's days were recalibrated, and modern timekeeping was born. In the end, the Gregorian reform did more than fix Easter. It aligned the human clock with the celestial one, once again making time a dance between heaven and earth. Today, the calendar feels ordinary, something printed on smartphones, office walls, and kitchen magnets. But behind its grids and numbers lies a legacy thousands of years in the making. A journey from sacred ritual to mechanical precision. From observing stars to syncing with satellites, timekeeping, once the domain of priests and astronomers, is now a global system, standardized, regulated, and relentlessly ticking. We now use the Gregorian calendar almost universally. It governs everything from international law to shipping schedules, space missions, and the Olympic Games. But while this calendar dominates, others still exist, echoing ancient rhythms. The Islamic Hijri calendar continues to guide religious life for millions of Muslims. The Hebrew calendar governs Jewish holidays and traditions. The Chinese lunar calendar shapes festivals like Lunar New Year. In India, regional calendars coexist alongside the Gregorian one. Humanity didn't abandon its diversity. It simply added layers of utility on top of ancient roots. And then there's atomic time, the most precise timekeeping method ever created, based on cesium atom vibrations. International Atomic Time, TAI, measures seconds with such accuracy that it would only gain or lose 1 second every hundreds of millions of years. From this we derive Coordinated Universal Time, UTC, the global time standard used for everything from internet protocols to airline schedules. Leap seconds are sometimes added to UTC to account for Earth's slightly inconsistent rotation, a reminder that even in the age of perfection, the planet itself refuses complete predictability. Yet despite all this precision, we still live according to rhythms that are deeply human. We celebrate birthdays. We look forward to weekends. We count down to midnight on New Year's Eve, hearts full of hope. Just as ancient people once watched the horizon for the sun's return, the calendar in its modern form is both tool and tradition. It keeps airplanes from colliding, yes, but it also reminds us when to gather, when to rest, and when to remember. Behind its cold efficiency lies the same desire that drove our ancestors to carve notches into bones and align stones with the sky. The yearning to understand our place in time. In measuring time, we measure ourselves, past, present, and the dreams that await tomorrow.